Michael's got one. You're all good.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll get going here. This is, my name is Scott Sherwood. I'm an attorney in Panhandle, and we're part of this team that Joe Lovell's going to explain to you here in a little bit. But my partner and I, Joe Sherwood, we've been working on fire cases since 2006. Joe's been working longer than that, but he contacted us, and we're part of that team, and I'm going to let Joe speak to it.
Okay, thank you, Scott. My name's Joe Lovell.
Are you from Dumas?
Yes. I'm originally from Dumas, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Did you know my dad? Yeah, that's my dad. He just passed away last year, actually. That's right, yes, sir. Anyway, born and raised in Dumas, and educated at Texas Tech twice. Came back up here, I practiced law in Amarillo. I've been handling fire cases. I think I tried my first one, I think it was 2000. It was 1996 Payne Ranch fire. Anyway, ever since then, it burns up here. Not as often as it has been lately, but it burns up here. So I've been working on fire cases since that time, particularly starting in 2006 with the big fires we had up here that you'll remember. Yeah. And I was involved in those, and actually so was Scott Sherwood. I knew Scott before that, but he actually was working on the dark side at the time, representing Cano Petroleum, who was the defendant in that case in the North Plains fire. Anyway, we worked against each other during that and came to know one another, but Scott came around, and ever since then he's been representing ranchers and homeowners and that kind of thing in these fires. So I've been doing fire cases ever since then here, as well as more recently in the 2022 fires in New Mexico. I ended up representing folks out of Ruidoso and up in that Hermit's Peak fire. And then we had this big one. Smokehouse Creek, 687 Reamer, Windy Deuce. I saw what was happening, how big the scale of this catastrophe was. And I knew we needed to put together a team because there were going to be many people affected. We did our investigation quick, found out that these were going to be liability situations. It's not lightning or cigarette butt on the side of the highway, anything like that. But in the case of Smokehouse and 687 Reamer, they were utility caused, XL, SPS. And in the case of the fire at Fritch, the Windy Deuce, that was oil field, which I'm used to. Anyway, I saw what was happening and knew it was going to be big, and we were going to need a team. And a team not only with experienced lawyers up here, but lawyers experienced in this kind of litigation that's going to involve lots and lots and lots of people who have claims against utility companies. And it's going to require a lot of resources to take on the utility companies for lots of people with claims. So I started putting together a team. That was me that did that. And I called my friend Scott Sherwood, who just introduced himself from Panhandle. Scott, like I said, we've known each other for years and years, over 30 years, practicing up here in the Panhandle. Scott's got a partner here, Joe Sherwood, his son and law partner, who's a crackerjack young lawyer and really brings a lot to the team. I've got a partner, Chris Hoffman. He's not here right at this moment. We had a town hall up in Canadian a little while ago, and he stayed back to talk to some people there, but he may be showing up here. An associate, Hannah Rivera. But then, because of the size and the scope of this and the necessary resources and experience, I also called somebody else Mikal Watts, who's right over here. He's going to speak to you here in a minute. Came to know Michael years ago through lawyers organizations, but then I brought him into a case from Amarillo arising, interestingly enough, he'll touch on this a little bit more, arising out of the construction of the XL SPS headquarters in Amarillo a few years back. Anyway, it was a horrific, catastrophic situation that was going to have lots and lots of defendants and require lots of resources, and I knew that my little firm was going to need help. And so I went out looking for who would be the best help for that, and I landed on Mikal Watts here. And so we worked together in that case for Keith Garrison. We did a really good job with Keith and his family, and so I came to know Michael real well in those years that we worked together. So, and Michael, as he'll talk about more, Michael, he has handled more wildfire cases than anybody, I guess, in the world. He'll talk more about it, but he represented all those tens of thousands of people up and down the West Coast, the PG&E fires. You may have heard about some of that litigation. One in particular, a great big huge one that Michael negotiated, a $13.5 billion settlement for the people involved in that one. Anyway, so I called Michael, got Michael on the team right away. I'm glad he's here. He brings a whole lot to this that's just not available anywhere else. Anyway, Michael, I'll introduce you, Michael, and let you go ahead and start telling about what we've done and what we're going to do.
Thanks.
Okay? Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael.
Well, thank you for coming. Well, I'm going to show you about a mile north of Stinnett, and we know exactly where it started. And let me just kind of take you through the details of it. You know, we started off, as Joe mentioned, he had a neighbor, I think, called him. He called me the day after the fire, and he said, "Hey, have you heard about this?" And I do a lot of wildfire cases, and so I got on the internet, and I feel kind of stupid because I told him, well, it doesn't look like that big of a deal. And he goes, "Give it time. It's pretty windy up here." And I flew to Maui to work on that fire for a couple of days, and by the time I got back, it was 1 million acres gone. And so we've been working on it ever since. And the first thing I want to say is Joe knows what he's doing. You know, he's done wildfire cases a long time. Scott's one of the best lawyers up here in Panhandle, and I told them they didn't really need me, but I was proud to to be added to it. And I've done these cases up and down the West Coast for a long time, but it's nice to finally get to do one in the state of Texas. And so I got my brother who's involved. He's the good-looking guy with all the hair. And then there's a guy named Jerry White, who's one of my partners. Jerry is not here because he's working on a case we've got in Los Angeles, a wildfire case, that literally starts trial next month. And so that's going to be our team. And as as Joe said, we started working on a case involving Keith Garrison, who was a welder's helper that got burned in an electrical arc flash while they were building the SPS building. And so we did that case and had good results. It got to know each other real well. I've been a lawyer for 35 years. I clerked for the Texas Supreme Court. Been doing big-time wildfire litigation for a good time. And I come here from my ranch in Mountain Home, Texas. And so when I see what it did to the ranches up here, it really hits home. And it just infuriates me because these places are our home. It's where our roots are, and this didn't need to happen. And so when I got called by Joe, the first thing we did, that's my son, he got married last month, or last week rather. But the first thing we did is we started we're looking for the cause of the wildfire. And I've done 19 of these across the western United States, and they fall into very distinct categories about what's causing this. But a lot of these wildfires are caused by just silly utility things that should never happen. So the first thing that I did is I got on the internet, looked at the fires. There were 5 of them up here that day primarily. And the Smokehouse Creek fire is the one that we'll start talking about first. And it's really not rocket science what we do. I mean, we figure out which way the wind is blowing, and then go to the point of origin. And so it's pretty evident the wind was blowing from west to east. So we went all the way to the east, and we've got all these databases that show us. And we started looking about a mile north of Stinnett. And that's where all the warning signs were that this thing got ignited. And so then we've got all these databases so that we can, in effect, look down, because we're looking for ignition sources. And the only ignition source that existed in the general area where we knew the fire had to have started was the utility line for XL. And so we dug in there, and we started looking at that. And the next thing you know, we put people out there, and there's a pole down right where we know from the burn pattern that the fire started. So we filed a lawsuit on behalf of a woman that had called us. I know the lawyers representing XL, so they had to tell us that they wanted to remove the pole and the portion of the pole that hadn't snapped down. So we put people out there and photographically grabbed the evidence, if you will, and we learned a lot. And here's the pole removal process that we were at, and we got to photograph the pole that fell. And the bottom line is this is a beat-up old pole that's got all sorts of degradation. And even worse, the pole inspection contractor for XL is a company called Osmos. And we see that Osmos had been out there. That little silver coin is an Osmos stamp that they pin into these poles when they inspect them. And they had inspected from Maui on an all-night flight. And this is a pole that fell over that started the fire in Maui in August of 2023, killed 102 people. It's pole 7A on Lahaina Luna Road, and you see those same Osmos pins where they had twice looked at it. And literally on Friday night, we're here on a Sunday, I was talking to the families of 28 people who burned alive in that fire. And when I told them it had happened again in the Texas Panhandle, they were just infuriated. And I don't blame them. And so part of what we're doing is pursuing this litigation so that we can prevent this kind of thing from happening again. But as we look at the pole, it's not in good shape. We've got good photographs from Joe Lovell's people that show there's high degree of degradation or just rot in effect, and that's why where it did. And so we got very quickly, which is a good. It's also good. In the state of Texas, we have the Texas A&M. California up to a year to get good Aggies here in the state of Texas quickly really confirm that everything. And as you look at the report, basically what they do is they go through and they're trying to deselect things like and industrial equipment and all the different things that could start a fire, and they went through and with the exception, and so they included the only cause, and they said ran right through the area where they found. The pole appeared to be decayed at the base, which is what we saw and photographed, and it snapped. The lines on the, we know what happened to start the Smokehouse Creek fire, and it feels good that we've got the official investigation body of the state of Texas, Texas A&M report. They started the fire. They need to pay for it. One of the challenges is, I've seen them do this before out in California, offering pennies on the these cases are worth, but more importantly, at one of my previous meetings said, look at that letter. You pay your claim or part of your or any Texas law and Texas regulatory requirements to make sure that what we're seeing in these other states where we've had fires. You may remember there were some big fires in central Texas, 11, and that caused the public in the state of Texas to make them, let's figure out how to. So they passed a rule 2595 of the administrative code requiring that these, in effect, publish grid hardening plans. And what's grid hardening? Basically, the stuff that's carrying your line doesn't fall during a storm. And so it's storm hardening plans. And you have to do that every 5 years. And you have to say, so they're going to replace, where are they going to replace them, when are they going to replace them. The poles that eventually fell, XL has already understood exists. And they do. With respect to electrical installation and use, poles are part of the distribution system of electricity. And so there's all these requirements. People whose job it is to strictly to monitor the inspection and the replacement of poles. They know that those if the pole down, plenty of fuel, grass we have that will start wildfires, especially panhandles with the kind of we had today. If you start the 2 days that is they have to figure out the spec and the maintenance of the poles. And this is where the interrelationship XL and SPS is the lines and also lines. Now here in the state of Texas, XL and SPS has a non-delegate to make sure that their structures are good. You can't pass it off on them. They all use Osmos, and so they have responsibility if Osmos got it wrong. One of the things that they've been doing across the entire grid, all the different states that XL is, they replaced about 3,000 poles in 2012. Our question is going to be why did and the like. Reasons we think is the cost of doing this down, and so we're going to have or didn't do it in order to save money. Lines, thousands of miles of these lines, and they've got to come up with and to do it in time to avoid these wildfires. These plans have to be submitted to the Public Utilities Commission, signed by the one by the president, the chief operating officer, and because year-round an area which is consequences of a fire and other places that we've got to do all this, and they understand that they need to do all this. So they've got wildfire mitigation programs, and they recognize the overall increase in risk and severity of the seasons. So you've got to do what we can to minimize asset-caused wildfires, that utility equipment caused wildfires. So all these are things that, and they need inspection to reduce the chance of cautions. And so it's fine these programs which are system. We're going to do this. It gets down to this high wildfire zones that operate the inspections. And I'm here to tell you that in the middle of the Texas Panhandle, you were in a high wildfire zone. They needed to do inspections faster, and they needed to replace. So what happened was not as we look over and over again, need to that may create the contractors about keep an eye out on these poles. A decade ago, did a program that kind of knew how to prioritize pole maintenance and what we're going to do next in the U.S. electrical grid. You've got to keep them going because without remedial treatment, when they decay, wind that pushes it all together, and you've got the perfect cocktail: food, moisture, air, heat. And so now, more recently, the regulatory bodies have been placing an increasing emphasis on how we keep these falling down and coming. So the third group I want to talk about, EPRI. Service site that they can fail catastrophic events and because of a loss of stressors, including insects and birds and fungus and the like. So these are all things they knew, They have something called the Transmission Asset Health Analytics System. It's designed to tell them where to start and where to go and the like. And everything we can see, we're in a high wildfire zone. We've got old poles. We're in an area with high winds. This should have been at the top of the list. Because we're in an area with high winds. This should have been at the top of the list. Because the process of assessing pole health is essential according to their own service companies. And so EPRI was reached out to by XL. XL said they were going to use it, but they didn't get to this. So we'll have to talk to all those folks as well. So the bottom line is what happened that caused these fires, that burned up all these properties, including yours, was something that caused these fires, that burned up all these properties, including yours, was something that was just predicted. Now, some of our friends over in Fritch